Hi, I'm Maria.
I'm her husband, Paul.
So I remember some time ago you mentioned something for me like emotions and the cables.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear you talking a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to when I had just begun my doctoral studies at the University of Tennessee, and I wasn't a Christian. And this person shared with me a pamphlet called The Four Spiritual Laws. And there was some really good stuff in it, but what gave me pause was a depiction near the back of this pamphlet. Had a depiction of a train. It had an old black steam engine that said fact, and then it had a tender that said faith, and then it had a caboose that said feeling. And then underneath that was a caption that said, the train will run with or without the caboose. And that's correct. You don't need a caboose for the train to run. But the implication of this is that the Christian life doesn't really need feeling. And then a little bit further on, it said, Christians do not depend on feeling. And that really got my attention too, because I began to wonder, is affect, consists of feelings, which are more private, and emotions, which are more public, is that not a part of the Christian life? And I eventually committed my life to the Lord, and throughout my years in Christianity, affect seems to be, in the words of that great comedian Rodney Dangerfield, affect just don't get any respect.
Oh my.
And you got to be wary of feelings. You got to be distrustful of your emotions. I mean, affect makes for bad decisions. And gifts of the Spirit, mere emotionalism. I went to a funeral once and somebody said, you don't need to be sad. You don't need to cry. I mean, she's in a better place, And so, it seems to me that the place where in Christianity where feelings are used most is when people are often kind of cutting down or insulting others who don't agree with their pet theology. They're hysterical, or, they just don't understand things well. Yeah.
So the title of this video is Cycle for Christ.
Yeah.
I'd like you to explain a little bit.
Yeah, when I say psychos, I'm not talking about psychology per se, I'm talking about psychopaths. Okay? So let me explain where that came from. Psychopathy there's different types of psychopathy, which I'm not going to go into, and there's different degrees of psychopathy. There's the psychopathy of the serial murderers, where they can kill somebody and feel nothing about it at all. And then there's the type of psychopathy that sometimes we see in politicians and journalists who, when there's a terrible tragedy, they show very little empathy for, the children who've been killed in a school shooting. They got to drum home their major agenda or political point instead. But the two hallmarks of psychopathy are often, number one, what we would call affective impoverishment. The serial killers often, they just have no feeling about hurting someone or anything that happens to anybody. They don't feel it, in a sense. And so there's an affective impoverishment. They don't understand, they have difficulty even any type of control over affect. And then the second attribute that we find in psychopathy is a lack of empathy. Something I've already alluded to before. They just don't really care for others. They can't put themselves in the place of others. And so I've in a joking way, have often thought that, if Christianity is to live a life with a suppression of affect, then I guess psychopaths would make really good Christians.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
But I thought that emotion could be a big source of problem for Christians.
Well, they can, if we're talking about lust and rage, etc. But a little bit of background before we get to talking about that is that affect, the feelings which are private, emotion which is more public, okay, they're essentially morally and spiritually neutral. In other words, they're not necessarily good or bad. It's the context that determines whether they're good or bad. You have joy in another's success, joy because some good things have happened for somebody else. That's one thing. But when you have joy in another person's failure or joy in another person's suffering, that's quite something else. The second point is that affect and cognition or thinking, they're often intertwined. So, for example, hatred. Hatred can lead to very ill will to somebody else, but there's often a thought that's involved in it. For example, hatred is often kind of birthed in someone's thought about someone and kind of nurtured in destructive acts. And so the thinking and the affect are often intertwined, and as we'll see in the brain, they're often intertwined together. They work hand in hand. The third thing is, affect out of control often can be destructive to self and to others. But ideas out of control can not only be very destructive, but I think they actually can be more destructive than feelings and emotions. I mean, the 20th century gives you a classic example of this. It's clear that the idea of social Darwinism played a role in Nazi ideology, particularly that of the superior race. And if you're the superior race, then from a social Darwinistic point of view, then getting rid of the less superior genes in society makes sense. Or let's look in the Soviet Union of Stalin, who one time talking with Winston Churchill, he just said off the cuff, with no feeling or emotion whatsoever, oh, those 10 million people who were starved to death in the Ukraine, they had to die.
Oh my.
Yeah. See, they didn't fit into the program of that Marxist ideology that stood behind communism.
So, you taught courses in neuroscience for many years and is published in the field. So, what the affect looks like in the brain?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
No. Yes, I will. Yeah. What's interesting is that when it comes to feelings and emotions, there are numerous areas of the brain that are involved with feelings and emotions, and many of those areas are also involved with cognition. They're often intertwined in the brain. I'd like to highlight two areas that I think are pertinent to our discussion today. The first is the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. It's kind of like right in the back of the middle of your lower forehead there. And this is an area of the brain that's crucial for abstract thinking, critical thinking, decision making, logic, all these areas of cognition. But it's also a critical area for understanding affect, controlling affect, regulating affect. I mean, the two areas are highly intertwined together. And a number of years ago, I was reading some research about people who have brain damage in this area, particularly people who have brain damage where it has destroyed some areas of the brain that are involved with affect, but it did not impair some of those areas that were involved in cognition. And so you give these people like an IQ test, a test of intelligence, you look at their thinking ability, their logical ability after they have suffered this brain damage, and they're really not impaired much. On the other hand, when you look at these people, when you look at their lives basically deteriorate, because what happens is without affect, you can't prioritize information. Without affect, you don't know what's important. So it's real difficult to make a good decision when you don't know what's more important than something else. It's difficult to live a godly life when you don't know what is important. You know, following Christ is supposed to be number one in our lives. Well, without that effective area of the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, you can't really tell what's most important in your life. That's kind of like when we talked about psychopathy, that affective impoverishment. The second area of the brain that is very pertinent to our discussion is an area of the brain that's involved in empathy. And actually, it's two areas of the brain that are involved here. And the first area is in the prefrontal cortex with a series of neurons called the mirror neurons. They're called mirror neurons because originally they were discovered and worked with primates when they were imitating. These neurons became very active. And so they're very active when people are experiencing empathy. And so those mirror neurons in the precentral cortex, they become very active with the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, that emotion area. Without that emotion, you cannot experience empathy. So, do Christians depend on affect? Well, if they don't, they're not going to be able to experience empathy. They're not going to be able to experience compassion. They're not going to be able to experience sympathy. They're not going to be able to experience pity. What kind of Christianity is that? You know, in the parable of the Good Samaritan, why did he go to the aid of the person who was in need? It says in the book of Luke, because he had compassion on him. So affect is essential for critical thinking, particularly knowing what's important and prioritizing information. And it is essential for experiencing empathy.
So, is there any final thought that you'd like to share?
Yes, love.
Okay.
One time Jesus was asked, what is the greatest commandment in the Old Testament law? And his response was, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and all your soul, and all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. All, not just cognition, not just affect, not just action, but all of them joined together. What God has joined together, let us not separate. Secondly, the great romanticist philosopher George Hegel once wrote that nothing great in the world was accomplished without passion. If anything in Christianity, we don't need to suppress our affect. We need to be passionate for Christ. And then I guess thirdly, I would say as a believer, we need to have a passionate conviction for the Lord.
Beautiful. So, thank you very much for watching, and please consider to subscribe to this channel because we're going to be posting some more interesting videos here. We really hope to see you again soon.
Please subscribe.